The world that we see around us is built on a story. Every culture has a different set of answers to these basic questions of who are you? What is it to be a human being? What's important? What's valuable? Where do we come from? Where are we going? How does the world work? Every culture answers this in a different way. And science provides some answers. It says basically that what you are is a discrete, separate individual among other individuals in a universe that's separate from you as well. And every field has agreed with this characterization of what it is to exist. Psychology, you're this bubble of psychology, or this mind encased in flesh. Religion, you are a soul encased in flesh. Physics, you're a mass subject to impersonal forces that are deterministic. Biology, you are basically a flesh robot programmed by your genes to maximize reproductive self-interest. Economics, you are a rational actor seeking to maximize financial self-interest. All of them agreed on what it was to exist. Well, the new sciences contradict that. Quantum mechanics seems to violate this separation between self and other. If we're separate from the universe, then of course we want to control these indifferent or hostile external forces, and humanity's destiny becomes to become the lords and masters of nature and to transcend nature. And it's not working too well anymore. In economics, that translates into growth, the endless growth of the human realm. And we're learning that there's a limit to that, and we're learning that it's not an external universe out there, but that everything we do to this world, we're doing on some level to ourselves. That is a wound that we feel all the time and that we suffer from. That pain of existing in our culture that's so omnipresent we don't even realize it, except when we're bored, you know? That feeling of, why does it hurt just to exist? When we're young, we have this knowledge that the world is supposed to be much more beautiful than what has been offered to us as normal. We understand that, but that expectation gets betrayed again and again and again, and to protect it, we develop cynicism. As our ecosystems fall apart, our political system, our educational system, healthcare system falls apart, things aren't working so well anymore, and it's a lot harder to fully believe in our stories. So we're moving into a different story of self, a different story of the world, a different story of the people. The self of interconnectedness, the self of inner beingness. One thing it means is that these tiny actions may have a significance beyond that we can understand. That logic of the heart that says, yeah, I know that this is a significant act, and I know that everything I do is significant, no longer contradicts the logic of the mind, which had been the logic of separation. And what effect could you, one tiny little being, have with the puny force available to you when the powers that be have so much more force at their disposal? Every act that comes from the understanding of interconnection, of inner being, is a spiritual act and also a political act. By acting from a different story, we disrupt the psychic substructure of our mythology, and we offer an alternative. This is something that's eminently practical, and any time that we give somebody an experience that doesn't fit into the old story, it weakens that old story. It disrupts it. It could be an act of generosity. It could be an act of forgiveness. Anything that violates that understanding that we're separate and everyone's in it for themselves. Being in service to something larger than yourself. And I would offer that as the formula for stepping into the flow of synchronicity. You don't know how to get from here to there, but that thing larger than yourself does. And it arranges these synchronicities, being at the right place at the right time, being in flow. I think everyone's experienced that, and usually when you experience that, it's when your world is kind of falling apart and you're in this state of uncertainty, and then all things like start to flow and they start to work, right? And we can enter that state when we let go of the paradigm of control and bow into service to this thing larger than ourselves. And what is this thing? What is it that unifies all of these different things that we're committed to? Let's call it the more beautiful world our heart knows is possible. As you go about your life, in fact, right now, feel that part of you that knows that you are here in service. And ask yourself if you're ready to bow more deeply into that service. If you do it, I predict that you will experience an unexpected opportunity to act on that intention. And it'll be just at the edge of your courage, but not past it.
Thanks so much everyone for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
This is a great gathering.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community. There's a lot of community happening tonight. I want to say welcome to all of the communities that are watching at home. This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network that we are looking to develop, and it all revolves around you. There's an exponential potential to the future of medicine. This is an allopathic conversion machine that we have just created. It can be seen by 1 billion people at no extra cost. That's the beauty of the internet.
Welcome to the Functional Forum, live from Ashland, Oregon. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for such a great warm welcome here in Ashland. Great to be here with everyone. We've got a full house, which I hear is unbelievably hard to do in Ashland because this building is massive. But I'm excited to be here with you. Thanks so much, so many people to come out. We've wanted to do a forum in Ashland for a long time, since we started to take the meetups on the road for so many reasons. One, because the functional medicine and the functional forum brand has always been about creating community, and also there's just such a strong thread of that here, but also just such a depth of talent in functional medicine, which you're going to see a little bit of this evening. So the topic this evening is interconnected medicine, and you can see we're big Charles Eisenstein fans at the Evolution of Medicine, and you can see that it's time for a new story when it comes to medicine. It has to be profoundly interconnected, and so what you're going to hear tonight are all different ways in which practitioners are seeing both the way that the body is interconnected, how we're connected to each other, how the different organs and systems in the body is connected, how community plays a role in medicine. So it's a perfect topic for Ashland. So because this is live, it is about 11 months since we did a live functional forum. It's my favorite one to do. Always when the tech works, it's better. But we haven't done it for a while, and I love doing it like this. And what it means is that if you're at home watching or listening, you can use Twitter, if we have it up on the screen there. If you hashtag functional forum, if you're watching at home, anywhere around the world. You can ask questions, and I can answer those questions as we go through. So I just want to give a shout out to all the meetup groups that are watching. One of the coolest things that has happened as a result, this is the 51st episode of the Functional Forum, if you can believe it. But we have, thank you, we have more than 500 meetup groups around the world of doctors getting together. Sometimes it's just 2 people learning at home. Sometimes it's 150 people in a dining room in Glendale, California, and getting together to learn about the future of medicine, to learn about functional medicine, to learn about how we can adapt, how medicine can adapt to its new environment of chronic disease. So for all the meetup groups who are watching, thank you so much for being part of our community. And all of the meetup groups are sponsored by Dry Farm Wines. Hopefully you got some wine there in the back. They've been huge sponsors of us at the Evolution of Medicine. A bit later this year, we're going on a 40-city tour, and Dry Farm Wines is going to have a little van that's going to drive behind us and serve their biodynamic, organic, low-calorie wines to people all over the country. And if you build a meetup group, so Ashland, I'm not sure if there's a meetup group in Ashland, and there definitely should be after this, but if you get 20 people to that meetup group, and it's not going to be hard to pick because you got 150 right here, you get a free case of wine. So that is, I know you got good wine up here. You don't need to be told what to do with your wine, but a free case is pretty good. And that's to gel the community. So we're going to talk about interconnected medicine. Let's make sure the slides are up on the side here so everyone can see this. So, you know, if I told you recently that as soon as I set up the energy that this was going to be the month of interconnected medicine, some really weird things started to happen in medicine. And a weird kind of interconnection started to happen. Can we put this up on the slide? So Cigna bought Express Scripts for $50 billion. CVS bought Aetna for $69 billion. And Walmart is now in an early stage acquisition with Humana. Not exactly the interconnection I was hoping for, honestly. And I don't think the kind of interaction that we were all hoping for. If you like food from Walmart, cigarettes from CVS, not technically healthcare, and we may be going a little bit further down a route that we probably don't want to go down. But I think this speaks to, sort of the opportunity. And what you're going to hear tonight is that, what I've always said, the first thing that I ever said on the Functional Forum, and this was 4 years ago, is we got to start as a community. And when I say the community, I mean all the practitioners in the community who are practicing integrative, functional, naturopathic medicine, and the patients who use that medicine. One of the things that we've always asked, we've got to start acting like we're winning. Stop acting like we're losing, because this is the future of chronic disease management. In just a couple of months, we're going to see that starting to come out from the Cleveland Clinic and show better outcomes at lower costs for chronic disease. This is the future of care. But just because of this sort of history of the man sort of stamping on the industry, there's sort of like this inferiority complex. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is to build confidence in the community, because ultimately medicine is and the cost of medicine is heading in a really bad direction unless we do something different. And I think that a lot of the answers to the most vexing problems in medicine are going to be communicated here today. And we're seeing as far as that many Americans are actually just skipping insurance altogether. It says here, prices and deductibles are rising, networks are shrinking, and even some well-off Americans are questioning what they're paying for. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to have 8 amazing speakers who are going to be coming through and sharing their viewpoints on interconnected medicine. And then right at the end, I'm going to make a massive announcement that I planned for over a year, and I wanted to make it in Ashland because this is the capital city of community, it feels like. Am I right? Right? This is America's capital of community. So we've been taking a stab. So, ultimately, what we started off as was a show, right? The Functional Forum was just a show, and our goal was to make it easier for people to be a functional medicine doctor. We need way more of them, right? In Ashland, you may think you have an embarrassment of riches, and there's one on every corner, but it's not like that in the rest of the country. And so, so the first step was to just coordinate the community, make it easy for doctors to switch and learn about holistic medicine. And I feel that functional medicine is the name and the brand that will bring this to the masses. And so I'm really, excited to help to forge the movement forward. But last year, I started to realize that building a network of independent practices, while necessary to the future of the movement, was not sufficient to get us to a point where everyone could get functional medicine. And one of the biggest sort of elephants in the room was 150 million Americans get their health care from their employer, right? And so unless you have something like the chance of an employer and a functional medicine practice sort of locking arms and making it work is zero, almost zero. And so, we started a new venture called New Health, and one of the cool things that we announced last month was this product called Incenticare from Benecomp. And ultimately, what Benecomp has realized, and they're ahead of the game on this, is that ultimately, that if the best way to change the cost of care for your company is to get people well and to incentivize them to be well and to get them off drugs and to incentivize them to help each other. And we're going to be talking a lot more about that. So if you're watching this at home and you know of an employer that needs to cut the cost of care, which is basically every employer, and if you add to that that the employer has the best incentive to cut costs, right? Because every dollar that they save ends up more profit on the bottom line, this is a big opportunity for functional medicine. So if you are watching this and you know of a company, or if you're a CEO or an HR manager, if you go to goevomed.com/employer, give us your details and we'll be in touch and show you some options. The other thing is that we're going to need an army of providers. So if we sign an employer in, if you sign an employer in Ashland, the biggest employer in Ashland or Medford, and we sign them up and now they're using this program, we need doctors to be able to fulfill that. So if you're a physician around the country and you're interested in getting functional medicine consults and working with employers, we'd love to hear from you. And you can go to newhealth.com/KPO to apply. Nurses, nurse practitioners, and doctors. And then later this year, kind of what we're doing here today is sort of like a preview for what this tour is going to look like. I just decided that, going to these functional forums the first Monday of every month is fun, but I love living in Venice Beach. I don't really like traveling so much, and everyone was just like, hey, Austin and Charlotte, and, can you come and do one in our community? And we only do 12 a year, so I was like, I'm going to get my family, we're going to get on a bus, and we're going to go and do 40 back-to-back. So that's coming June, so you've all got a flyer for it. So, if you're watching this, we'd love to see you, and we'll be talking more about that as we go on. All right, so it's time for our first speaker. As I said, we have an embarrassment of functional medicine riches here in Ashland, and one of the powerhouses of the functional medicine movement. I know they've helped a lot of people in this town. Please, a warm welcome to the stage, Dr. Michael Stone.
Hello, hello, hello. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I wanted to say that seeing all of you, we're pretty connected. We came here years ago. David Jones, the first president of Institute for Functional Medicine, asked Leslie and I to come to join his practice so he could do that. And almost all the practitioners that I've seen here tonight, we've shared patients, and we're connected at least there. I'm connected to Leslie Stone, who's supposed to give this first talk. But because of death of his sister last week, I said I would step in. We have to rethink medicine. We have to rethink it because of the chronic disease epidemic. And what I want to do tonight in the next 6 minutes is talk about how we've rethought when disease begins. Disease begins... health begins in the womb. It actually begins preconceptually. It actually begins the last generation. It actually begins the generation before that. We know that there are methylation markers, that our DNA is marked by the environment of our ancestors, and what happens in the womb is key for what happens in the instance of chronic disease. When you look at the functional medicine timeline, notice on the left, the vertical line on the left, we have the preconception and the prenatal period. It really begins with the genetics of the mother and what's washing over those genetics, and the genetics of the father, as you see. And the genetics of the father actually affect how the nutrients are transported across the placenta. So what is bathing the fetus? It is affected by many different aspects during the 9 months. All the different things we're exposed to, whether it's adequate over and under nutrition, or whether it's toxins or infections or mitochondrial dysfunction, whether it's the mother's ability to detox, how she transports molecules from point A to point B, to how the hormone HPA-TG axis affects the stress levels in the fetus, affects disease. There are 4 phenotypes. The child is too stressed, too early, too small, or too large. And all those other aspects listed in that column affect that outcome. And any of those 4 phenotypes affects the disease occurrence in that offspring, and in that offspring's offspring, and that offspring's offspring's offspring that we know from primate, rodent, and now early human studies. We know all the chronic illnesses, but especially these 4 are transmitted transgenerationally by affecting different genetic markers. And how do we change that? And so the program that we're talking about is really assessing some of the genetics of the mother, trying to address very specifically by trimester and actually during preconceptually different key nutrients, trying to assess the 5 modifiable lifestyle components of nutrition, sleep, exercise, thoughts and emotions, and relationships. And we then affect the outcome of that pregnancy. So has it really worked? Well, when you start thinking transgenerationally, and when you start looking through this lens and looking through the functional medicine lens, as Leslie and our clinic has, Leslie's delivered over 5,000 babies in her career. I delivered about 1,500 before I stopped. We've delivered a small village. And what we saw in family practice is patterns. And so we started to go through and try to consider what things can we change and how can we impact transgenerational health. And so we put together a program with a brilliant nutritionist, Emily Ridbaum, who's going to be speaking right after myself, and using her nutrition knowledge and health coaching and our functional medicine knowledge and the shoulders of the giants we stood on in our functional medicine understanding. And we put together a program that when we compared the first 110 people who went through that program to the people in our community, we noticed that preterm birth rates were non-existent in those 110. And then we started looking at what was the effect on pregnancy-induced hypertension, gestational diabetes, small for gestational age, large for gestational age, and compared it to the state and national and world data and look at our numbers. And we know that if those babies are not too small, too stressed, too large, or too early, we know that their chance of chronic disease by the time they're 18 is significantly less. But if it's transgenerational, it should affect the outcome of health in the next generation. So we started looking at the offspring. And where autism is 1 in 45 males and 1 in 160 females, we had 1 child out of 400 on the spectrum. And atopic dermatitis and asthma is that much less. So the interconnectedness of us as fathers, as mothers, to our child in the womb, to their health and disease is prominent and emerging. And so our timeline begins for them preconception. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. And you guys you see one of the themes here is the use of functional medicine and coaching and nutrition together. That is a huge part of the kind of practice model that we've been advocating for, to have practitioners working together. So let's hear from the other part of that dynamic duo. We're following the trend here sort of generationally. So we're starting right at the beginning with preconception. Thank you, Michael, for stepping in for Leslie. So let's welcome up to the stage. Here's Emily. Ramp.
Thank you. My name is Emily Ridbaum, and I have had the immense pleasure for my entire life to listen to functional medicine. Dr. Michael and Dr. Leslie Stone are my parents. I literally was birthed into this world. Yet, when I was tasked with the translation of what this profound research suggests, I had mothers and fathers looking at me with these eyes welled with tears, saying, what in the world am I supposed to do with this information? Not only can I create this child, I can birth this child, and then now you're telling me I can affect my family for 3 generations? What do I do? So taking the current research that Dr. Leslie and Dr. Michael Stone put together, I helped them create an implementation program. That implementation program was based off of the modifiable lifestyle factors, which does include sleep, movement, relaxation, relationships, but primarily food. Because if there's one thing we know, whole food is always going to open the parachute. We know that if we're going on a boat trip, we want food and water in our boat, but if we hit the doldrums, man, do we want a different current. So, in the true essence of functional medicine, which I think the magic lies in the individualization of what that person is and who the person is that's sitting in front of me, I was able to create, are my slides working? I was able to create 12 different food plans that addressed timing first and foremost. That in the first trimester, we know that organogenesis is the primary function of what a female is doing in the development of a fetus. And in organogenesis, we know that there are very specific nutrient cofactors that when we meet that woman with the right timing, that we can ensure that we are addressing her nutrient needs through protein, fats, and carbohydrates, and also the very specific micronutrient needs of minerals and vitamins. So these food plans are based off of 1st through 4th trimester information. We also know that following these common morbidities in pregnancy in the United States and in the world, that there are very specific mortalities and morbidities that come with pregnancy-induced hypertension, gestational diabetes, small and large for gestational-aged babies, as well as the nutrient needs that may come from a woman who is breastfeeding or a woman who experiences anxiety and depression in pregnancy and therefore potentially in the postpartum time period as well. And so delivering this every single day, so I have been a part of the 400 women that have gone through our Grow Baby program. As Michael elucidated, these women were not only met with an individualized nutrition plan, we also recognized that stress plays a large role and impacts what we choose to eat. And when we are able to address sleep recovery, and therefore hormone balance, and therefore mindfulness and our food choices, and reinforce that in, I think, one of the most ancient and wisest traditions in healing, which is group gathering, like we are doing now, that profound change can happen. And in also the spirit of this interconnectedness, we know that people learn in very different ways. So our Grow Baby program not only highlights the individual, we gather women who are of like gestational age, encourage their partners or any of the family or community support that they may have to come and join so that they can reinforce the same message to this female, where then all of a sudden there's a culture of empowerment. Because what we know about the social narrative of an American mother and American father is that it is, the undertow is very fear-based. We want to erase all of that. And our program reinforces it time and time again of look at everything you can do to affect this change. Look at everything you can do to change 3 and 4 generations of your family's health. And in that moment, you watch face changes, you watch body changes, and you realize that they have received and heard this information, that they can do this. So one of the things that we realized, Leslie and I realized, was, oh man, we would love to travel all over this world and help bring this information, this rich information, to all the women and all the parents who may desire it. Yet, we can't be in a million places at once. So we created technology platforms that disseminated this information in a readily available way online. There are blessings and curses of technology, and I'm going to consider this one a blessing, where we were able to transmit and translate our information into e-learning modules and even into a mobile app. So you literally have a nutritionist in your pocket. And it's all based off of foods we know that are going to change metabolic processes. It is all based off of stress management techniques that we know are specific to a second trimester change in maternal health and therefore fetal health outcomes. And it also encourages the other pillars of what we know lifestyle is, which is movement, relaxation, and also relationships. And so between our in-person classes, the constant reinforcement care that's given in clinic, and then reinforced in different technology platforms, we have been able to create a robust program that reinforces and empowers mothers everywhere. And it is, as J.R. Tolkien says, in life, I will not be walking backward. And so I think moving forward with this information, it is with urgency that we try to reach as many women as we possibly can. Thank you so much.
Woo. Thanks, Emily. Awesome. Let me take that. Jason. Urgency is absolutely crucial. I'm so glad that we, brought that. Obviously, the value of functional medicine to unwind chronic disease is super powerful, but ultimately, we need it in more scalable formats to be able to get to the masses. So technology plays a huge role. Groups play a huge role. Any healthy behavior, when reinforced by a group, ends up being that much easier to stick to and actually that more functional. And I just want to share one example of an idea that I've seen happening everywhere else. It's probably happening in Ashland just because of the psyche of the Ashlander. But one thing is that what we heard is that people say, oh, it's very difficult to cook all the healthy meals at home. And we've heard of groups of people doing what we're calling community batch cooking. So imagine when you batch cook on a Saturday or a Sunday for all your meals for the week, doing that in a group with a glass of dry farm wines. Very fun. Maybe even using some people do it on a Monday and take over a restaurant and a commercial kitchen because the restaurant's shut on Mondays. So, that's a great way to be able to if you're going to make spaghetti bolognese, it's going to take as long to make it for 2 people as it is for 20. And so, there's value in there. So thank you, Emily, for sharing. I know there's some transgenerational epigenetic warriors in the room. Jennifer Margulis is here and others, so it's really proud. So if we were going to have a show on interconnected medicine, I couldn't really do the show and not have someone representing Chinese medicine, because although it's not directly correlated with functional medicine, I know that there are many, many practitioners that find the synergies between it, and it is a profoundly interconnected type of medicine. So please welcome Ashland, fan favorite. His office is literally a stone's throw away. Please welcome Jason Miller.
Hey, thank you so much, James. Hey, thank you all. So glad to be here tonight. I thought first I'd just mention that I think Michael said it, standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's what I feel like when standing in this room with all of you, all my friends and peers and colleagues that I look up to and have learned so much from. Thank you all so much for being a part of this amazing community, the Stone family. These are David Jones, people that have been an inspiration to me, and coming from a traditional medical system, Chinese medicine, I didn't get a lot of functional medicine in my training. It's not really a part of what we do. But I did dig deeply into biomedical concepts, and I was a pre-med major in my early college years, and I find that the two systems, traditional Chinese medicine and biomedicine of today, they're very connected. They're wonderfully woven, and they just have to be approached in a way that they maintain their own sovereignty. And I think that's really important. And I want to talk about, when I think about interconnectedness between our community and how we connect our different forms of medicine, we got into this idea that integrative, we want to integrate everything, bring it all together, which kind of has this synthesizing type of an idea. But I think what happens when we do that is we start to lose some of the power of the strength of those sovereign systems. And when we bring them together, for me, it's important that I maintain the integrity of the system that I was trained to use, this traditional medical system called traditional Chinese medicine. And when I think about bringing it into the modern context, and I think about the term interconnected, I think about people, and I think about their relationships. I think about my community. I think about nature, and I think about our weave with it. And sitting here and watching the 8-minute video that started off this functional forum, I really got a really deep sense and a nice emotional sense about what this movement really is, because getting here today, I didn't really know. This is my first time into the functional forum, and it was all kind of mysterious as it kind of built towards this day. And I feel like watching that video brought me a lot closer to what this is all about and what it means to bring functional medicine closer to the people who need it. Our population of people here in the United States and around the world who need deeper care. They need a more thoughtful approach. They need a deeper look at their problems. They need lifestyle change. They need to change their diet. They need to change their lifestyle. They need to see why it's important to do those things. So we need to coach them. We need to work with them and teach them. And so that's where I think that we can come together, all of us, sharing our talents and our gifts and bringing together this collaborative medical system that I envision for the future. And hopefully we can get there all together, and with the help of James and this group and the groups around the country, I think we have a great shot at it. So I wanted to mention, when we think about traditional Chinese medicine, people often think of, this sort of ancient form of medicine. It's often thought of as woo-woo. It's often thought of as fairy dust. Words like qi, words like yin and yang. What does all this mean? Well, for me, when I chose my direction and I moved away from just straight biomedical approach to medicine, when I left medical school in my 4th year, I finally said, I'm going to do something different. And I found that the concept of yin and yang is what inspired me the most. It was that the structure of our world is duality. Everything is somehow in relationship to something else. There's no thing that isn't relative to something else for it to exist. I'm above you guys right now, but I wouldn't be above you if you weren't below me. And so there's this relationship in everything. And so Chinese medicine applied that basic principle to everything. And it started with a lot of kind of Taoist principles also that were very dear to my heart, that nature is a deep well of knowledge and wisdom for us. We're deeply connected to it. Without it, we don't survive. We need each other. And that's what brought me to Chinese medicine and why I focused in on that area. Of course, I've branched out a lot from there, and one of the places I've gotten deep into is research. And so when you get into research in the modern day, taking a traditional Chinese medical system that has its roots over 2,000 years ago, bringing it to today, well, it's a living organism, so it lives in today. Traditional Chinese medicine is alive today, and there's research continually going on in China and around the world on studying how these medical concepts and how these therapies that were developed so long ago can help people today. And so we have to take the research that we have and find out what's the best available evidence we have. And I put up here, traditional usage. Traditional usage, well, that's the first place I go to. I go to a textbook. I go to something that I learned from a teacher. I want to find out if it's a plant medicine, even if it's a drug that came from a plant. I want to know what was its use traditionally, when people saw the world a little differently, when people were present a little differently, and they understood how something worked through empirical observation over generations. They gained information, knowledge, and that to me is important, and that's the first place I look for evidence. And then I go to the research. I dig through PubMed. I go through the Cochrane database. I find what is there to point to the truth in this situation. What's the best available evidence to show me, is this going to work for my patient or not? And then I'm going to go to, what is my clinical experience? What have I found to work or not? Or what did my teacher or my colleague teach me? And I put those things together because right now the cost of research is so exorbitant. I mean, I deal with plants. I use herbal medicine. I use plant medicine all the time, every day. But to study plants in a phase 3 clinical trial, it's exorbitant. I mean, it's $125 million is the prediction to get a drug passed through phase 3 trials. Who's going to pay for that for a plant that you can't patent? You can't make any money off of it. Nobody's going to do that. So slowly, research is trickling in China, in universities and institutions that are education-based. So the best available evidence might not be what we find on PubMed. It might be some combination of these things that I put up here. So traditional medicine, I like this slide because there's a path in the forest where people have already walked for how to do things, how to make dietary changes for people, how to apply foods as medicine, how to apply medicines to people, how to understand what's going on for them and address their problems. The path has already been there because we've walked on it. So we don't want to start from, we don't know anything. We're going to start from today, and whatever we know within the research context, we know, and anything else is non-existent. It doesn't exist. It's not evidence. That's not where I start. I start with the traditional evidence because we've already walked these roads. The people that were doctors 1,000 years ago in a village, they cared about their patients just like we did. They shared information just like we did. They were digging for the truth all the time. So this brings me to collaborative medicine, which I think is the most important term. It's this multidisciplinary, multi-perspectival approach where we actually collaborate and we say, your lens that you see the world through, that's beautiful. The way that you can address this patient, you take their pulse, you look at their tongue, you ask them a huge host of questions, and then we evaluate their lab work together. And the doctor says, I also did a couple of extra studies. We did an EEG, we did an EKG. They wore a Holter monitor for 2 weeks. And then we put their information together and we say, God, this patient could benefit so much from what both sides of the doctrines are bringing here, how we can make this patient the centerpiece for something really beautiful, a piece of art that we bring together. And so collaboration to me means that we all do our parts. We play our parts, we play our roles in a non-hierarchical setting where we all respect each other and we respect each other's ideas, and we even get into disputes and arguments because that's important to be able to enrich what we know and how we know what we don't know. And so I love that challenge with each other. So collaborative medicine is my push, and I think that traditional Chinese medicine has a beautiful place in it. And what was just said earlier today about how we can affect change across generations, I think that that's been known for a long time. And to see the evidence coming out now is really beautiful. The microbiota has become a huge focus now in medicine. Neurogastroenterology, a huge place that we're realizing that the microbes that inhabit our bodies actually have a huge role in how we think, how we feel, our health. Well, you know what? That has to do with our ecosystem. It has to do with the soil of our bodies. And we've known that forever. People have known that. We didn't know there were microbes. We didn't need to. We knew that if we fed our body a different kind of soil, that it changed the ecosystem in our bodies, and then it changed how we feel. Now we know that there are microbes that actually feed on the different things we eat. They actually change the way that we metabolize those foods that we eat. They change the neurotransmitters in our brains. They change how we think and how we feel. So what we're learning today oftentimes points back to some of the truths that we have from back in the early days of medicine. And so I'm all about bringing it together. So my idea is whole medicine, where we address the whole person. We look at their, somebody touches them. We feel their bodies. We touch their skin. We take their blood pressure. We take their pulse. We examine all aspects, what we call Sherlock's Corner, all available evidence. I want to know everything I can about that patient. I'm not going to deny them getting some kind of testing. I'm probably going to refer them to testing. People come to me a lot for care in their cancer, they're managing their cancer. And a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want you to treat my cancer. I want you to give me herbs to treat my cancer. And I look at them and I say, wow, you have an advanced disease here. You know what we need to do? I'm happy to support you with herbs, but let's get over to see my friend who's a general surgeon and my other friend who's an oncologist, and let's see if we can get a little more information and maybe put together a plan where we can help you diminish this tumor, and we can use herbs and nutrition to support you and get you on the right diet. And slowly over time, we'll really be able to keep you strong through these therapies. But again, it's collaboration that's going to give us the best outcomes. Thank you all so much for the time. Great to be here.
Thank you, Jason. Much appreciated. Give us a bad. Yeah, so we had to have Chinese medicine as a piece there, and collaboration is so key, and that's one of the reasons why with the Functional Forum it was so important for us to build these meetups, because what we saw was so many practitioners who practiced a different type of medicine felt super isolated in their community. They didn't know anyone else who did it. They would go to other conferences and maybe see other people around there, maybe once or twice a year, but ultimately getting together regularly. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because what we've seen is that those practitioners that get into a regular community connection, where they're meeting once a month with other like-minded practitioners, their confidence goes up. And ultimately, we need a strong dose of confidence in many areas. And my next guest, I think, speaks to a little bit of this, because type 2 diabetes is a perfect example for me of the differentiator between what the medicine that we have now and what it could be in the future. The medicine that you get for type 2 diabetes, metformin, it is not possible for that to reverse the condition. There is no way back with that plan to get to a point where you're just healthy. And this is not just in America where it's the most prevalent, but my dad lives in South Africa. Growing up 15 to 20 years ago, the #1 diagnosis is TB. Now the #1 diagnosis is type 2 diabetes. So this is super important everywhere. On the other side, you see the reversal of type 2 diabetes fairly frequently in the clinics of the practitioners that we're working with. And so the confidence to be able to say, hey, look, we're reversing type 2 diabetes in our practice comes from having a structure to do it consistently. And I'm always excited when practitioners feel the sense of confidence, like I've done this 10 times, I'm going to talk about it because I know that you can do it too. And there is a man in the Ashland area who does that. We've been friends for a few years. I know that his patients are getting better, and I know he's having the tough conversations in medicine that are really hard to have when you're talking about lifestyle change. Please welcome Dr. Thaddeus Gala.
So whether you're a healthcare provider or not, how many of you feel that you have information or advice that if you could give it to somebody, it would improve their life? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you've been in front of someone and you laid out all this great information, but they didn't make the changes. So there's already enough hurdles out there to get your message across to people. And I think one of the most impactful statements that came to me during one of my talks was information does not equal implementation. And we can have the best information in the world, and these speakers tonight are great, and I have no doubt that of everyone in this room that you have an amazing skill set, an amazing amount of information, but if it's not being implemented, then what's the point? So, and I think there's an elephant in the room, and there's a bubble that I believe is coming in healthcare, and I believe that the people in this room are committed to, whoops, did that other one show up on there? Oh yeah. That I believe there's a bubble, there's an elephant in the room, and there's a bubble coming if we don't correct this. And the worst question a patient can ask is that I'm going to share with you tonight, that whenever I hear this question come out of a patient's mouth, my heart sinks. Because whenever I hear this question, I realize that we are so off track from what we should be focusing on. Now, why I will agree that it is a very legitimate question, and it is a relevant one, but it's completely misguided. And I believe it's almost creating this mindset that's almost akin to arguing over how we should arrange the deck furniture on the Titanic. And it's completely misguided. And why is this important? Well, I would say it's the worst question a patient can ask, and I'd say this is the tipping point that perpetuates rising costs, worsening outcomes, and your sanity as a provider, and it inhibits your ability to do your job. And we know even though life expectancy was growing for many, many years, and where it should be, versus around 2011, it started to plateau, and for the last 2 years in a row, it's actually dropped for the first time in history. So that we see a big gap in terms of where we should be, despite spending more and more money. So why is this a problem? Well, in about 1960, we spent about $1,200 a year on health, if you can call it health. Now we're spending about $10,000, and that's adjusted for inflation, which is about an 8 times increase, which from the 1960, we went from about 5% to around 18% of our GDP. Are we getting healthier or sicker as a nation? We're getting sicker, and we're spending more money doing it. So we know what we're doing isn't working. Even looking at the simple obesity rates, we know has been going up dramatically. We have some states now that are approaching 40% obesity. I have never in my career, ever, one time, met someone that loved being obese. And what I mean by that is nobody wants to be this way. And despite spending more and more money and throwing more money at this, we're not getting to the root problem, interfunctional medicine. Of course, I had to throw Oregon up there to represent, right? 28% obesity rates. And you can see where we started back when they first started tracking this data. Oh, there you go, on the slide there. So you can see where we started back in, well, about in the 90s when we started keeping track of this data. So we know that we're getting sicker, and this can be just about for any trend, right? This is diabetes. You can look at just about any healthcare issue, and we're getting sicker as a nation. We're living shorter, and we're spending more money. Those curves and those graphs can't keep going in that direction much longer. And again, information doesn't equal implementation. We don't need another diet book. If diet books were all we needed, this country, the U.S., would be probably one of the thinnest countries in the world. We don't need another diet book. We don't need another special potion or lotion or pill. Now, all those things do have their place, but we need to be getting to the root cause of the conversation. We talk about getting to the root cause of medicine, but are we getting to the root cause of the conversation? And there's a wedge, and there's an elephant in the room that we're not adequately addressing. And it shapes the decision of where the patient is going to go, whether they're going to be a success and a win, or they're going to be a loss. And I believe one of the worst questions out there that makes my heart sink is, do you take my insurance? And while I believe that's a very relevant one, I believe it completely drives a wedge between what the provider wants and thinks is best for the patient and what the insurance is willing to pay. So now you have this patient-doctor relationship, and the insurance company is a major wedge. And I don't know how many of you, well, I won't make you raise your hands on this, but I know many providers hesitate to have the conversation about what they really believe in their heart is best for a patient, out of fear that the patient won't be willing to pay for it or can't pay for it, so they never even have the conversation. Or providers that dismiss the best treatment or the best recommendation out of fear that they have to have the conversation of, yeah, well, I know your insurance won't pay for this anyways, or it's experimental, so yeah, I don't know what that is. Or when a patient calls a clinic and says, do you take my insurance? And they say no, and that's the end of the conversation, even though that may be the practice or the provider that patient needs. And again, I'm not saying that it's not a relevant question, and I'm not even saying that it's the patient's fault. It's the mindset that we have today that is really permeated our mindset our culture as a whole, that we believe that insurance is there to take care of everything. I was speaking in LA and at a conference, and right before I went on stage, this gentleman got up there, and he was an insurance adjuster. And he said, here's the problem. And it was really enlightening for me, because I kind of have this idea that insurance agents and the drug companies are kind of the villains, right? And he gets up there and he said, here's the problem. Patients and the public wants insurance to cover more and more. However, insurance was never designed the way it is today. Insurance was designed to account for the unexpected. Let that sink in for a second. Insurance was never designed for preventative. Insurance was designed for the unexpected. Let's use a real simple example. If someone is morbidly obese, they eat horribly, they don't exercise, and all they eat is sugar all day long, and they happen to get diabetes, Is that unexpected? Well, of course not. And this is the problem, is it's kind of akin to going to the car dealership and thinking that the insurance should pay for your oil change, or that the insurance should pay for new windshield wipers, or your insurance should pay for new tires on your car. Imagine the cost of insurance for your car insurance if we expected everything that we had for our cars to be going through our car insurance. And then where would the personal responsibility be to maybe drive a little bit slower around curves to save on the tires? To maybe take a little bit better care of maybe our engine, or to change the oil sooner, if we knew that it was our responsibility versus someone else was going to be paying for it. And I would illustrate that this is part of the problem in that healthcare costs are going up. We're getting sicker as a nation, and doctors more and more are not having the conversation about what patients really need, and instead are telling patients what they think they'll go for. So I would challenge, if you're in healthcare, I would have you do a gut check whenever next time you're talking to a patient. Are you telling them really what they need and what's best for them? Or are you telling them what they think that their insurance will cover? And for your patients or your family and friends, I would encourage you to say that same thing in terms of, really the question should be, what is the best decision for me with the least amount of side effects and risks, and who is the best to help me with that? And then decide, is my insurance going to cover this or not? Or if my insurance isn't going to cover this, then ask yourself, where are my priorities in this? And so my encouragement to you is to have that tough conversation and not be afraid to open that up with your patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Thaddeus. Such an important part. You can give it to Michael. All right, so we're going to move swiftly along, and that was, we're going to come back to insurance later, so watch this space. We've got something exciting to talk about right at the end. So earlier on, I spoke about type 2 diabetes a minute ago. The second biggest killer, the biggest issue that's happening is cardiometabolic disease. We have, a leading light in that. Back to do his presentation, here's Dr. Michael Stone.
Healthy you, determining the healthy you. Well, it comes down to modifiable lifestyle changes that all of us have control of. But often with cardiometabolic syndrome, you know the symptoms: elevated blood sugar, elevated blood lipids, elevated blood pressure, increased body composition, meaning more fat, being overweight, obese. But now we're looking, and we know that every single one of the modifiable lifestyle factors can influence that. We know, all of us know our blood sugars and our cholesterol levels or lipid levels, but we're looking at them differently. We know that inflammation can be the result or the driver of all the problems in cardiometabolic syndrome. And then when you look through the functional medicine lens, look through the functional medicine matrix, whether it's nutrient adequacy for your genotype, whether it is underlying infection, chronic infection, mitochondrial dysfunction, your ability to detoxify everything from heavy metals to pollutants, to your ability to transport sugar or lipids in and out of different spaces, to the neuroendocrine influences, and structurally how you are unique as your fingerprint, then you can begin to figure out how to reverse your condition. Inflammation is the driver, and all the causes, all the systemic causes that Jason Miller talked about, we know where many of these initiators happen prenatally. We know that if inflammation continues unabated, that indeed it will lead to Alzheimer's, some of the inflammatory causes of dementia, which Dr. Gordon's going to speak about. A lot of healing has to occur when we really take into account what's driving our inflammation. 50% of people with normal lipids have heart attacks. 50% of people who their first symptom of heart disease is sudden cardiac death. So we need to look at things other than just the standard lipid panel. When you reach up, each of you reach up and feel your carotid artery, right? Your carotid pulse up here at the carotid bulb. The question you have is, do I have vessel inflammation? Do I have disease? Do I have inflammation I have to take care of? Well, we take advantage of carotid intimal medial thickness, the advanced lipids, and we try to figure out, with additional testing for endothelial dysfunction, whether our vessels are moving from healthy to endothelial dysfunction, where you start getting injury, to plaque accumulation. And this is all subclinical, far long before somebody has a heart attack or stroke or a TIA. And our goal is to reverse that. And we reverse that with the help of, first, the technology that helps us, in-office ultrasound, that helps us determine whether somebody has disease, whether they have disease and haven't had an event, or they've had an event and we do not want them to have another one. And so we take advantage of health coaches and nutritionists that really help the patient help their change. And it really is that partnership between the client, the patient, their willingness to change, meeting with the nutritionist and health coach in group medical visits or group education visits, monitoring 3 months, 6 months to a year. And in the last 8 years, we've successfully had reversal of inflammation, reversal of hard plaque to mixed plaque to soft plaque by controlling inflammation. When you understand your inflammatory drivers, which each of us have unique inflammatory drivers, we can then begin to understand what our risk is of cardiometabolic syndrome and how we can reverse it. I got into this because my grandfather and father each had heart attacks and strokes by the time they were 50. I had normal lipids until I was 54. I thought everything was great. I had carotid intimal medial thickness testing, and I had the arteries of an 84-year-old at 51. Using the old markers really didn't help, and thus started the journey of figuring out the drivers of inflammation. That can be autoimmune disease, can be heavy metals, can be diet, can be lack of sleep, issues with exercise. All the modifiable lifestyle changes that actually, when instituted, will bring hope. Because I don't look at anybody with atherosclerotic disease or cardiometabolic syndrome and believe that they cannot improve their condition. When you look at it through the functional medicine, the collaborative lens, the interconnected understanding of blood fats, blood lipids, blood pressure, and body composition, we can empower the patient and they can get better. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Give it to Deborah. All right, so we're taking on all the big guns. We've done type 2 diabetes, we've got heart disease, both functional medicine approaches, showing to be able to reverse them when you can get the patient involved and participatory. But there's one other disease that comes up a lot. It's not in terms of the numbers, but one of the reasons why it's so debilitating, and this has gone in my family, is Alzheimer's. And one of the reasons why it's such a problem is because one patient with Alzheimer's needs 3 full-time carers. And so the numbers of costs just go through the roof. And one of the things that I heard actually last year at a functional medicine conference is the number one way to get Alzheimer's is to care for other people with Alzheimer's because it's so stressful, right? So we're setting in a ridiculous circle, that's the opposite. What do they call the opposite of a virtuous cycle? It's going, it's going downwards because ultimately you just have more and more people that need to be taking care of people. And so in this darkness, started to shine last year or a few years ago a light. And I know Dr. David Jones played a big role in this. But last year, a book came out called The End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen. And Dr. Dale Bredesen is the first person whose research shows that it's possible to reverse mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's. And one of the reasons why he came to partner with functional medicine is because the functional medicine provider is skilled on understanding the root cause. Because what he saw is that there's different diseases. And various doctors have gone down to train with Dr. Bredesen with a vision of bringing this back to cities and towns all around the country. And we are very happy to have in the room tonight one of those doctors. Please welcome Dr. Deborah Gordon.
Ooh, bright lights. It's great to be here tonight with our incredible Ashland community, and I particularly have to thank James for this opportunity to speak, because I've waited more decades than I care to admit to say the following 2 lines to a group of people. You ready? One that April with his sure suta, the root of March hath pierced to the ruta. So all you old Middle English fans will know those are the opening 2 lines to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales prologue. I heard them first in my junior year of college, and I was smitten. The Canterbury Tales catalog the journeys of a random group of pilgrims that start out at an inn. Is my slide up? Yeah, I think. Start out as an inn, and they're making their spiritual pilgrimage to the Canterbury Cathedral. Along the way, they share tales that they've made up, ostensibly fictitious tales, but as they tell the stories, it's very clear that they are revealing everything about themselves, their personalities, their background, their occupation, and as the tales goes on, they're revealing their reactions to other people's tales, the little peevishness that they might get after hearing their occupation discounted. The interaction between them impressed me so much with the personal insight and the complexity, far more compelling than what I'd been learning in my psych and social classes, so I ditched that and I became an English literature major and stuck with it. And of course, what that meant is when I went to medical school, I had to choose family practice as my specialty. Because what I do every time when I meet with a new patient is ask them to tell me their story. I want to learn as much as I possibly can about the details in their life that have brought them to that moment where they're sitting with me and sharing with me their concerns about their health. Nowhere is that more important than when they're bringing their concerns about their cognitive health. Whether they're interested in preventing or reversing evidence of cognitive decline, I want to know as much as I can about their story. What's brought them here? What's their exposure been like? What are their relationships like? And then I order a whole slew of blood tests, get an MRI, and I'm going to tell you why I do all that. As you're sitting here, you have to know that you have an amazing and a brilliant brain. It's helped you navigate every step of your life to this point. And as you sit here, it's helping you pay attention or decide not to. It's helping you place a name with that familiar face you saw when you walked in the door. Another way that your brain is brilliant is its requirement to be fed. It loves to be fed. It needs vitamins and minerals. It needs a good night's sleep. It needs lots of activity, physical activity and mental activity, and it needs rest from both those things. It needs good blood vessels that Michael just talked about to help transport things to the brain and away from the brain. Ideally, your brain would like a world free of toxins. Your brain can't always get all those things. And here's another amazing fact about your brain. When it can't get all that it wants, it makes do. If you didn't get a very good sleep last night, your brain will figure out how to rearrange your hormones and your neurotransmitters, and you'll get through the day. If you go on a kooky Ashland diet for a while and don't consume any B vitamins, your brain will figure out either some other nutrients that it can use, or it will take some part of your brain that's less important and temporarily, hopefully temporarily, shut it down. What that means is it takes the accumulation of a lot of things to go wrong repeatedly for you to develop a problem where you can no longer make new memories and your cognitive skills are declining. This is a process that happens slowly over years and very gradually, and it's very complex, which means the process of preventing or reversing that decline is also complex. It always starts, doesn't it, with a good night's sleep, a good night of natural sleep, one that's maybe bolstered by some, they may sound like chemicals, but they're really just elements that your body makes. So it's melatonin or tryptophan. Anything your body doesn't make is not giving you good restful sleep. It also starts with a diet. What you eat is very important, as the nutritionists have talked about tonight. We start with a plate that has protein and fats on it, and we choose them according to your genetics and your metabolic profile. We surround that protein and fats with a lot of colorful vegetables. That's great, and if your blood sugar can handle it, you can have some fruit. What you don't eat, or when you don't eat, is also important. So for the patients that I talk with about their brain, and you, I encourage you, take a 13 to 16 hour overnight fast. Your brain will thank you for it, as will your body. What your brain does during that time is bring out the cleaning crew. It's called the glymphatic system, and it has to operate in the absence of new food coming in, and it cleans out the debris of the day. It might even clean out some of those environmental toxins. We should all be experts on this here. Do you know how many cars drive through I-5 every day? 35,000 cars. We're breathing their exhaust every day here in Ashland. So your brain, ideally, to stay young, does some kind of mental challenge. Brain HQ, up on the slide, is the best documented way that you can challenge your brain and measure its abilities and see if they're improving or declining. You should also keep an active physical life, and that means, yes, walking or rowing or cycling a little bit every day, and a couple times a week, doing it really quickly, getting some intervals in, and a couple other days a week, lifting some heavy objects, ideally with somebody showing you how to do it. Chill. It's really also very valuable to learn some way of getting your body, your brain to be quiet. Not empty, it's different, but quiet. So whether you meditate or find a meditation app on a smartphone, I encourage my patients to do this. And the last picture there, so we take all that blood from you to see what your metabolic markers are, because there's a host of supplements that can help compensate for things that have maybe gone awry. And that's a picture of fish oil, and fish oil is almost always a part of this protocol. So this is complex. This is a lot to do. Whether you're thinking about preventing or reversing cognitive decline, you can't do it alone. There's always a circle of hands that starts with a person very close to the patient, and it might be a spouse or a loved one or a good friend, someone who can help you along and partner with you on this journey, because it really is a journey, and just like the Pilgrims and the Canterbury Tale, there will be challenges and surprises and great rewards. In my practice, we also take a group approach. We need a team, so there's more than one doctor. We have health coaches that we work with, and health coaches help the patients to prioritize their goals, and the health coaches help us identify whether maybe we need another person on the team. Do we need a chef to help someone chop vegetables? Do we need a younger member of their family to show them how to use the computer so they can play those games again? Or do we need a nutritionist to help them chart their path in a life without sandwiches and sweets? You notice there was no bread or sugar on that dietary plate. And I think a lot of the team I work with, it started with Dale Bredesen and continues, and this is another one of the blessings of the internet. I had a great exchange with another doctor using the Bredesen protocol in California today, and we exchanged the medical research on introducing hormones at advanced age for their cognitive benefit. It's been a tremendous, rewarding community for me to work with, and working with patients, implementing this community. We're together with practitioners and patients and the world around us. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be creating a community of health. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Gordon. So you can see, this is sort of an example of what's happening all around the country, and what we're trying to encourage is to bring together providers, to bring together teams so that we can work together to work on these really complex chronic diseases. So next up, it's my great pleasure, we, again, standing on the shoulders of giants has been said this evening. We have done 51 episodes of the Functional Forum, and up until right now, have never had the chairman emeritus of the Institute for Functional Medicine on the show. You can see tonight just what an impact. If we're talking about interconnected medicine, look at the web of connections that have come from this next man. Please welcome Dr. David Jones.
Now, you're going to keep the slides up on side, right? And now, they're seeing that? And please keep it there. You can see me, and so you don't need me put up there. I have prepared some nice slides for you, because I'd like to discuss the journey of healing. How many here are practitioners, healthcare practitioners? So there's about 50-50. Okay. I've been here for over 45 years. It's been a privilege to be in Ashland. And what I want to start this with is what I've learned in that 45 years. The first is the secret to the care of the patient is caring for the patient. And I mean really caring for the patient, because being a practitioner is complex. To be successful, where's the energy to do that? Well, the energy comes from the patient, because the patient is somebody that if you don't care for, you won't dig as deep as you will if you do care for them. So this was a statement that was made almost 100 years ago at the graduation of Harvard's medical school. And Dr. Francis Peabody was one of the first scientific doctors and started one of the first scientific journals. And yet, what he spoke to was what he learned the last few years of his life as he died slowly from cancer, was that answers come from caring. It doesn't necessarily come from the objective side of our brain that we call science. We live in an era where the objective world is preeminent in everything that we do. Science is the king of the kingdom in terms of assessing objective reality. And yet, my clinical experience is that the subjective reality of patient's life is probably more important than the objective reality that we assess. How we live, how we feel, how we love, how we eat, how we relate, is going to make a decision deep inside of us whether we want to be here. And if we don't want to be here, there's plenty of ways of leaving the planet. Heart attack, quick. Aneurysm, stroke, quick. Cancer, slow. But you leave the planet, and it's respectable. That has to do with a subjective reality, and if the molecules are there, and your deep subjective reality is that you want to be here, that you have reasons that drive human beings like love, caring, community, the things that we're talking about in terms of connectedness, then you will use those molecules to help you be here. It's not the other way around. From my 45 years of dealing with patients, I can put molecules in them, I can have them buy molecules that are supposed to do certain things, and often they don't. And why don't they? There's a subjective reality to our life which has to be taken into account. Now, the corollary to that in terms of the practitioners is caring for the patient requires really, really knowing the patient. And I mean in domains of their life that can't be evaluated or even begun to understand in a 5-minute visit. This was a wonderful book, The Nature of Healing, because what I want to move to as we go is a study we did about healing. So the mandate is to cure if possible. Curing occurs very infrequently, and we celebrate it. If by some chance you got hepatitis C, not only can it be controlled, it can be cured now. I don't need all 10 fingers to talk about huge cures that have occurred during my 45 years as a physician. Because mainly what we do is we deal with the issue of healing. And mainly it's healing suffering and understanding where the suffering's coming from in the particular person we're dealing with. And there's really only one goal, and that's the well-being of the patient. And so what do I mean by that? Well, just happen to have an answer. Patients have a sense of well-being when they're able to pursue their purposes. That's a very subjective statement. And achieve their goals. Again, very subjective. In life's various domains. Now, understanding the patient's domains, understanding the notion of domains, the social determinants of health are very well worked out now. In some cities, what bus stop or subway stop you get off on if you live there is a predictor of how long you'll live. And that's the generality as opposed to the specific. There's, according to that subjective reality of that patient or that person, that those social determinants have greater or less effect. So this is the question I've asked myself from the moment I moved here, because I moved right out of training. How do I deal with puzzling questions that patients bring me? I was sitting at my desk at the about 2-year stint, and I looked at the schedule of patients that I had seen that day, and I realized half of them should have stayed home because I was seeing the side effects from medication. And what was I trained to be? A purveyor of drugs. And if you think for a moment conventional medicine is not controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, then you are not in a position to take care of yourself. And that's what I faced as a doctor at 2 years. That list, and then the other one on my desk at the end of the day was who is coming tomorrow. So the question I asked myself, do you know who to call and say, don't come because I don't have anything but drugs that is not going to help you? And I realized I didn't know enough. And that's when I began a search for how could we enlarge that portfolio of understanding of where we really made a difference. And that was where the birthing of functional medicine came from, because I was lucky enough to meet Jeff Bland, who was a very inventive biochemist, and then he came to Ashland every quarter, and we delved into nutritional biochemistry, and then it just blossomed after that into what we'd call functional medicine now. But the driver was always the secret to the care of a patient is really, really caring for the patient. Otherwise, it's too damn hard to do. It's tiring. But, and this took decades for me to understand, if I really trusted what I just said and could stop at the door and say, for a moment, can you stop thinking about all the things that you're expected to do and think about the persons in that room? And ask yourself the question, are you quiet enough to actually listen to the patient without giving an answer to move along, but really together put it on the table, what you hear from them and what possibilities are, without being directive. And my life as a practitioner changed because I stopped being the answer man and I got to be the observer of miracles. A miracle is something that's not expected. It's not expected to walk into a room and ask the patient what they think. Early, I had this experience where I was working with a patient with a very serious medical problem, and I tried everything that we were thinking about in the early origins of functional medicine. Pharmacology, nothing helped. So I looked at her and I said, I'm flummoxed. That's a big medical word for I don't know what in the hell is going on here, and I'm not helping you. And I said, I feel so flummoxed, I'm going to step out of the room, and I'm going to ask Dr. Brown, who's here today visiting, and ask him to come in and interview you. So I stepped out of the room, walked back in, introduced myself as Dr. Brown, and said, Dr. Jones is flummoxed. And I'm not sure he asked you the following question, but what do you think is causing it? And that's when I learned that work is a lot easier if you actually create a context where someone trusts you enough to tell you. And it was she was in a situation where they had kids, she needed the work that she was employed by, but it was a very onerous employment relationship. So my prescription for her was to call my banker, and after she said that they had a business plan that no one believed, and the banker put her in touch and she got a small business loan. And they've been very successful, and I see her downtown every once in a while, and she's never had any incidents of that problem. So what did I learn from that? The secret to the care of the patient is caring for the patient, and really, really caring for the patient enough that you get yourself out of the equation other than you know a lot, but you have to let them select what you lay on the table as possibilities, and they will select because they live in their world 360 days of every year. And they have the wisdom if you can create a context. So that is a great lead-in to healing. Let's see. This is what I think is very well spoken in terms of why we've lost the art of healing. Healing is replaced with treating. Caring is supplanted by managing. And the art of listening is taken over by technology. Doctors no longer minister to a distinctive person, but concern themselves with fragmented, malfunctioning biological parts. Let's take care of the diabetic down in room 332, for instance, would be one of the examples of that. The distressed human being is frequently absent from the transaction because they're not allowed into the room in an authentic way. This was a wonderful book. The story behind this study was at Vanderbilt, they went in the larger area of Vanderbilt and asked, who in town do patients talk about as having a healing presence? And they rounded up 50 of these people, and they said, you're acknowledged as having a healing presence in our community. What do you think is the reason for that? Well, this was actually the least interesting of the books, because the second book came out, and what they did was they took the 50 practitioners and asked them, give us the name of 5 people that you think have had an experience of healing. Not that you did it, but that had an experience of healing. They interviewed them, and look at what the people said. I think this is so revealing. We think that what we do as clinicians is we're a fixer of discrete problems. There's 10 important things there, and only one of them is what we think we're supposed to be doing. Because the other ones are what create a context where transformational processes can occur. So we did a study where we studied the life of 23 patients, 23 people that had horrible things happen in their life. In fact, they were so horrible that every one of them had considered committing suicide. And in studying the extensive interviews and transcripts of their travail, we came up with some very important key things. What we found in the healing journey is that when something happens that a person is suffering from, there's an emergent property to those that healed. In fact, we had trouble getting the paper published. It finally was published in the British Medical Journal. because we didn't have a cohort. Because when they asked us, where's your cohort? Well, these are people that commit suicide, and it's hard to get their opinion after they've committed suicide. So this is a group that did not commit suicide. And to get to the bottom line, because I see James over there with a hook, the emergent properties are really, that it's an iterative process where the person has people in their life where they gather as they go along different skills for handling their self-abusive behavior in healing that keeps them from healing. And in every one, there was a reframing of the experience that they carried like a wound every day. That was one of them. Another one was that not one of them didn't have someone that really, really cared for them. And unfortunately, that someone was only 2 people out of the 23 that had a health care provider that really, really cared. It was most often someone in their life. And so I'm about to come off the stage because it doesn't matter whether you're a patient, a physician, a health caregiver. It's the connectedness we have with one another that creates healing. And it was that connectedness that helped these 23 people resume a life. Very often, they become someone in service once they reframe their life in a way and go through enough iterations of that process that they become successful. And I think I should speak to one of the important people for one of these people. It was his dog. Because he said, I couldn't commit suicide because who would take care of my dog? And I don't have anybody in my life that has given me more love than my dog. So this brings me in mind of a statement from the South. One of my son-in-laws is from the South, and he said, this is a common homily. I wish I was half the man my dog thinks I am, and with that, I hope that I'm half the man that I thought I could be standing up here in front of you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jones. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, so hopefully just seeing profound layers of interconnectedness and interconnected medicine. The last speaker that we're going to have on stage is from Asante, which is one of the big hospital systems here. We wanted to have something that would bring this together because we've said for a long time on the Functional Forum that community is the guru of the future. Please welcome Sheila Clough.
Good afternoon, good evening, all of that good stuff. When I came in, it was afternoon. Now I bet by now it's evening. It is a true pleasure and honor to be here this evening and asked to do this by some of my heroes in medicine, the Stones and Dr. Jones. I'm not a practitioner in functional medicine, but I'm a patient in functional medicine. I noticed that. I can't speak to these, David. I'm going to keep moving these along, and we'll get to my slides eventually. All right, perfect. As a patient in functional medicine, I just want to applaud all of you who are practitioners in functional medicine for really leading the way on behalf of patients like me. I've benefited from your practices, and I encourage you to keep doing it because it does make a difference, and I'm here to tell you that firsthand. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Asante Ashland Community Hospital here in our community. I'm also on the Board of Directors for Southern Oregon University and the Board of Directors for the Chamber of Commerce. And on that board, I chair the Health and Wellbeing Initiative and Partnership. And I don't share that with you to share a little bit about my resume, but rather I share that with you because in all of those avenues and arenas in my life, I've had the opportunity to see the connection between the community and the environment around us and the impact it has on the health and well-being of our students, of our employees, whether they're employees of small businesses or large businesses. I see how the impact our community has on the citizens that live in this community, as well as even some of the patients that we take care of within our hospital. This awareness between the connection between our community and the health and well-being occurred for me about 3 years ago, when the director of our Chamber of Commerce tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we have this project. See, we have this problem that's starting to manifest itself in our small businesses within this community. And we'd like you to participate on this project and help to identify and resolve the issues of employee health within our small businesses, within our city employees, within our school systems." And I said, "Sure, this sounds like a great project for an administrator of a hospital. Why not?" Well, this small group, like any small groups do, they started with gathering data. And we started by going to the business leaders and interviewing our local business leaders and asking them about the challenges that they were facing regarding their employees. And we heard really interesting stories about how their employees' health issues were impacting the productivity of their businesses. But it was more than just the health issues of the employees. It was the issues of the employees' children and their parents that they were taking care of. And it went beyond physical health issues. It included mental health issues and went beyond that. They told us stories about challenges their employees were having around financial concerns. And those financial challenges then made it difficult for them to get to work. And challenges around transportation and housing. And then these small business owners particularly were talking about how, as a small business owner, you're not only running your business, but you're also the counselor for your employees. Because many of the employees didn't have great support systems and networks that could help them during some of these hardships and challenges. So all of these interviews brought us to the conclusion that we had a big problem. And this is a problem that we decided we needed to tackle because it was impacting the vitality of our businesses within this community. If you didn't have employees who were showing up to work, or if they did show up to work and they were in bad morale issues, for small businesses, it was the difference between staying open or closing. And so we decided we were going to take on this issue of trying to figure out how to deal with these really diverse problems for our businesses within this community. But we knew it was huge. How were we going to tackle this elephant? Well, fortunately, just as we were trying to decide what to do, along came the Oregon Healthiest State Initiative. A couple of years ago, our governor at the time kicked this initiative off because he believed that it was important to improve the health and well-being of all Oregonians. You see, Oregon ranks number 35 in terms of overall well-being. Not the greatest place to rank in our nation. So through this initiative with the state, we learned about the Gallup Healthways Well-Being Index. It was a concept of overall well-being. Well-being is a concept that captures the important aspects of how people feel about and experience their daily lives. And it includes more than just physical well-being. There are 5 elements to the overall well-being index, including having purpose, and liking what you do each day and being motivated to achieve goals, having a social well-being, which means having supportive relationships in your life. Overall well-being also includes financial well-being, being able to manage your economic life to reduce stress and insecurity, which includes food insecurity, managing money, living within your means, managing your stress and your worry about money. And overall well-being, the last element, is community. and liking where you live, feeling safe where you live, and having pride in where you live. So you, like the rest of us, may be asking yourself, why does well-being matter? Well, according to the studies by Gallup, individuals who are thriving in physical health alone are still 68% more likely to miss work due to poor health. Conversely, those individuals who are thriving in all 5 elements of well-being are 36 times more likely to recover during a hardship. It's about resiliency. They're 2 times more likely to exhibit adaptability to change. And we know in life there's a lot of change, isn't there? They're 23% more likely to donate to charity and 43% more likely to volunteer. So when you think about a vital community, you want people who are thriving in all 5 of these elements. And it's through this well-being index that we started to see the connection between people's health and well-being and the environment around us. That concept was further solidified as we learned about a study that was done by the University of Wisconsin, where they were looking at the determinants of what makes a population healthy. So I think somebody said it earlier, the social determinants of health. Well, only 20% of what influences a population's health is related to medical care. It's kind of disappointing for those of us who are in medical care. But more importantly, we learned through this study that 80% of population health, or determinants, things that determine a health of a population, are things like behaviors, socioeconomic factors, and the environment around us. So another way to say that is that behavior is shaped by the social, culture, and physical environment around us, and that impacts our health. Think for a minute about your own health. Your own health, and think about how diet impacts your own health. And now think about how challenging it is to manage your diet, and the diet that you're managing is either easier or more difficult depending on the environment that surrounds you. Think about going into a grocery store. As you go into a grocery store, that's a landmine full of areas of good decisions or bad decisions. Think, for instance, if we changed the way we had our grocery stores set up so that the grocery store was laid out in a way that it was easy for us to make good decisions about what food we were going to purchase. Think about your physical exercise. We've engineered physical activity out of our daily living. How many of you walked to school? It's about 90% of you. How many of you do your children or your grandchildren walk to school? About 15 to 20% of you in the room. We've engineered sidewalks out of our communities. We've engineered exercise out of our daily living. So as we started realizing this, we recognized that if we were going to improve the health and the well-being of our community, we needed to be able to tackle that at a community level, to change the environment where we all live, where we work, where we play, where we go to school. And that collaboration is key, because no one stakeholder in this community has all of the answers, nor do we have all of the influence to ensure that we re-engineer a healthy environment around us. So I'm really excited that the Ashland Chamber Board of Directors has endorsed a community-wide effort, and we now have officials from our city, from our public health department, from Southern Oregon University, and many of our businesses within this community coming together with one goal and one vision, and that is to create an environment or a community where the healthy choice is the easy choice, where financial well-being, social connectedness, a sense of purpose, and pride in our community can be maximized. We know that this is going to take years. This is a change in our environment, it's a change in our culture, but we believe that there is a benefit to that. We believe that if we improve the well-being of our citizens in this community, it will have an impact on reducing medical costs. It will have an impact on improving outcome and productivity within our community. And that will impact the total economic vitality of this community. So I'm excited to be part of this, and I'm excited to be in a community where a group of people like you in this room tonight have such a care for this community and the improvement of the overall well-being, that you take the time to come to forums like this. So thank you once again for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with you in this community-wide initiative.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you so much. All right, we've almost wrapping up here, but it's been such an honor to bring all these practitioners together to share these stories with you and hopefully set up what is a very exciting future for the future of medicine, where we can shift from the old story of separation to the new story of interconnectedness. And the plan that Sheila just laid out for Ashland is actually a good plan because it's working in other places. If you're British like me, you know that Frome is said Frome and not Frome. But in Frome, they say the town that's found a potent cure for illness is community. And Frome in Somerset has seen a dramatic fall in emergency hospital admissions since it began this process. And you see in the bottom right corner there, the Blue Zone. So the Blue Zone research that went around the world looking for the healthiest communities, they brought back those ideas to a town in Minnesota, and health costs went down by 40%. Now, the problem with that, who do those benefits accrue to? If you reduce healthcare costs by 40%, who do those benefits accrue to? The insurance company, right? We have a fundamental issue with interconnectedness in that the basis for how we interact with the medical system is built on a story of separation, which is health insurance, and you can see it in that diagram there. And so ultimately, you know, what we've been looking for all the way through is been looking at what are structures that have the right incentives. And a few years ago, when I first, for the first 8 years that I lived in America, because I was relatively healthy and I had a lot of doctor friends, I was uninsured. I was uninsured for the first 8 years that I lived in America. And then I had a child, and I realized that the value proposition was probably not the same thing, and I needed to get some insurance. But it's all very expensive. I lived in New York. And so, one of the things that I came across as I was doing the research were these things called a Christian health cost-sharing ministry. Has anyone ever heard of those? Right, so yeah, you guys are smart. You've heard of it. So the Christian health cost-sharing ministry, there's actually 5 of them. There's the 4 on the left and then Liberty on the right. So the thing that they have all in common is that they were given an exemption to the ACA mandate. So if you had one of these things, you didn't have to pay the tax penalty. And they were way cheaper. And you had to, they were way cheaper, and the incentives ran in the right way, because it moved from an idea of personal responsibility to an idea of community responsibility. But you had to be Christian to sign up, and for that reason and a few others, it never reached the mainstream, even though more than 500,000 Americans today use Christian health ministries. And I thought to myself all the way along the time, wouldn't it be amazing if our community, the practitioners, could start their own health cost-sharing ministry? But it wouldn't be a ministry because it's not Christian. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could build something like that? And I looked into it and I found out that there were only a certain number of exemptions given. And even though we've got a healthy community of practitioners who, you know, take healthcare seriously and take their own health seriously, that are perfect fit for that kind of thing, we couldn't do it. And we actually, if you've been following us for a long time, you know, in 2015, we actually created a product with Liberty HealthShare, which you'll see over there. And then Donald Trump, 90 days ago, signed his tax bill. And although that's been unbelievably controversial in all different kinds of ways, my unique understanding of the situation, based on the fact that I've been in functional medicine and using those Christian health cost-sharing cooperatives, is that right now we have the opportunity to do it, because the individual mandate has gone away. We're not forced to buy health insurance as a result of that. And so for the next 3 years, there is an opportunity for us to create something truly unique. And it goes beyond what a health cost-sharing ministry does. And these were the details there. And so what we're proposing and what we're going to be starting to launch today, and we're going to be launching and talking about all the way through our tour, is the idea of a health cooperative. It's more than a health cost-sharing ministry, because we're not just sharing the costs. We're actually sharing the health. We need to incentivize people to get healthy, and more than anything else, we need to incentivize people to help each other. There is no incentive in medicine that has been an evolutionary imperative for the last million years for us to support each other. And that incentive is not here in medicine, and it needs to be brought back. So for the next 7 months, and including this tour, we're going to be going on and talking about this beginning of a new health cooperative that we're launching here. And I had to launch it in Ashland because it's so aligned with the way that you guys think about the world. So if you're watching this video, you can go and click below and sign up. And I created a book called The Top 10 Ways to Save Money in Healthcare. If we're going to be a cooperative, the first thing is friends don't let friends pay retail for medicine. And as an example, if you just go to use your insurance to get a lab test, like say homocysteine, you could pay $737. But if you go directly to the labs, which you can in 47 states in the nation, you could pay $17.50. That's a saving of 98%. And if you have a high deductible plan, you're paying it anyway. So you might as well work it out. So this is the new vision for medicine. New is all about combining the right incentives with the right care. We've got the functional integrated medicine community. We've worked out over last year how to scale it up by using health coaches. And we are going to be going city to city to 40 cities all across this country. By the time that open enrollment starts on November 1st, we want to have 10 to 15,000 people at least that are committed to joining the first health cooperative and set a new vision for the way that medicine is done. You know, we've said for a long time, the next functional forum is the 5th or the 7th of May, and we're going to be going into it deeper. You know, we've said for a long time on the functional forum that community is the guru of the future, that Thich Nhat Hanh quote. Well, ladies and gentlemen, community is the guru of the now. Thank you very much.